Okay, who am I interviewing here?
Dr. Lynn Sereda, David Sereda's father, Joe psychologist extraordinaire. Extraordinary in the sense that due to divorce trauma, just at the point when I was finishing my PhD work at Berkeley in the late 60s, we divorced, and it threw me into deep wound pain shock for quite a few years. And it started me on an inner journey, an inner transformational journey focused around, the finding of deeper states, more whole being states of consciousness, the whole phenomena of actually becoming fully conscious. And so in the course of my journeying, my seeking in order to find these higher states, I was blessed not only to have, over the course of my life, 7+ near-death experiences, some of them being much more intense and deeper than others, but I've also was blessed to discover similar states within the process of me learning to be meditative and go deeply inward into investigating the deepest nature of myself. And these experiences were very similar to, and at different levels of intensity, to the near-death experiences that I had. So given some understanding of my background, my son David Sereda, who a lot of people have heard about, who put together a video movie called Quantum Communication, got me involved. In addition to my psychological understanding, he got me involved in understanding some of the leading edges of quantum physics. And so the first part of my new book that I'm working on, which is toward that unified field theory of positively everything that Einstein and many other scientists have been looking for ever since, what came to me in terms of my understanding of quantum physics is that Einstein never really took his theory of relativity far enough. Because when you take the concept of material matter mass densifying and condensing into ever larger clumps or close together mass, such as happens in the center of any galaxy where, the stars and the planets and all the space junk begins to get closer and closer together to the point where it starts to create one huge gravitational effect, which would curve space-time, in terms of what Einstein demonstrated in relation to the sun and how, it curves space-time even in relation to our planets. So if you can imagine at the center of a galaxy that the electromagnetic gravitational force gets so strong that it literally starts to pull material matter mass through an event horizon by way of what's known as a giant black hole, it pulls that material matter mass back into pure dark energy. And part of what I argue in relation to having read a paper by Paul Dirac that David turned me on to, because every atom is short one electron, and material matter mass seems to have greater positron or proton charge at the center of these atoms, which is basically a positronic force. And as that positronic force starts to gather and get more and more dense as it moves, material matter mass moves towards the center of a black hole, that core protonic positron force gets so strong, the positive force gets so strong that it pulls the electron field at the end of every atom, it pulls it back through the center of the neutron force in the center of the atom and pulls it back into pure electron energy, which is what dark energy is, I would argue. Dark energy is an electron field, what Paul Dirac referred to as the sea of negativity, which helps to make up for those, every atom having one less electron than the proton force inside of an atom. So there you go. There's this huge event horizon. And what modern physics is claiming is that when you get to the other side of this event horizon, the material matter mass is first reduced into ordinary light and then to superlight. What John Malusky, a local New Mexico scientist working for the labs in Los Alamos, he came up with the idea that there's a superlight force in the universe, and I would argue that as material matter mass and the electron force is pulled through a dark hole, it shifts from ordinary light into super light speed or non-locality. In other words, it's so fast, it's pretty much instantaneous. You know, what John Malusky said, the power of ordinary light speed to the power of 10, which makes it pretty much instantaneous, non-local. So there you have, now I've explained how, in terms of my unified field theory, that material matter mass, what Einstein didn't take into account is that the curvature of space-time gets so strong that it actually curves back into no space-time or non-local space-time, which is what, you know, my son David Sereda's whole video was about, quantum communication. At that quantum level, superlight speed, it reduces into this, what I would call the weak force, because I would call it the weak force, and you'll get to understand it soon, and it's because it's continuously expansive. Once material matter mass and the electron force is pulled through a dark hole and goes out the other side into superlight, it keeps expanding. This is one of the things we know about the nature of the universe. It keeps on expanding. So what I'm saying is, now, given what Paul Dirac argued, he posited the existence of this sea of negativity because what we know about the nature of everything in the universe is always a counterbalancing force. So he's arguing that the counterbalancing force was a sea of negativity to counterbalance the positronic force in material matter form. So there you go. Now we're in the other side at superlight speed, non-locality. Well, in the same way that you can argue, if there's this huge field, dark energy field, there must be, in terms of equivalency, a similar positronic field force, you know, out there at superlight speed. And we refer to this in modern physics as dark matter. And so why is it called dark matter? Well, because if you can imagine that positronic force is spinning in the opposite direction to electron force, then when these two forces interact at superlight, non-local superlight speed, they immediately slow the superlight speed down. They start to reduce it back into ordinary light speed by a process known as angular momentum. In other words, ordinary light starts to, given the interaction, I like to show the idea of these two forces spinning and interacting, and there's this vesica Pisces overlap, which happens every time these two forces spin and interact, and at right angles out of there is going to shoot ordinary light speed at right angles, which starts to form sacred geometry, the very sacred geometry necessary, you know, first of all argued in the ancient Jewish tradition, Hasidic tradition, argued to be the Star of David. But, you know, typically we look at the Star of David in only 2 dimensions. Actually, it happens in 3 dimensions. So there's this 8-pointed Star of David, the very first sacred geometrical pattern, which starts to form the basis for material matter mass. And as the interaction between these two superlight forces happens, it's also creating what is known, if you see it in 8 directions, it creates what's known as the flower of Aphrodite, which, I illustrate all this stuff in my book.
Is it referred to as a star tetrahedron? Is that what we're talking about?
No, eventually it gathers into a 64-sided tetrahedron, which is the first material matter particle mass. But it starts with an 8-pointed Star of David. Or
is that the key to life?
It's the key to material matter
okay.
form. Okay?
Yeah.
And here's the thing about this whole superlight speed, dark energy, and dark matter. What we know in quantum physics, that dark energy constitutes like some 70% of the material matter mass of the universe. Dark matter some 25%. And material matter form only 5%. So what I'm saying is that the interaction between these two forces, the weak force, which constitutes 75%, the strong force, which is spinning in the opposite direction, and it's spinning inwardly, contractive. So as it goes through, as dark matter goes through dark energy, it's contracting inward, okay? And it's starting to create the sacred geometry, and also the flower of Aphrodite, or the flower of love, is starting to be contained. It's starting to manifest. It's starting to hum, resonate inside of the first subatomic particles that form. And so what I'm saying is, these two forces, electron force and positronic force, dark energy and dark matter, constituting some 95% of the material matter mass of the entire universe, are actually circulating around and recreating a new galaxy, because at the edges of the galaxy, as material matter mass starts to form through sacred geometry and subatomic particle formation, what you're starting to get is the accumulation of electromagnetic force, which starts to attract more electromagnetic forces or particles, and gradually at the outer edges of a galaxy, you're starting to see the formation of a new galaxy. Okay? So part of what I'm arguing is against any notion of the old Big Bang theory, and saying, going back to one of the original theses in the Old Testament, which is that the so-called God force or God principle is without beginning or end. It's an infinite force, dark energy and dark matter. And it's these two forces interacting with each other, going through each other, actually penetrating through. If you picture the dark matter penetrating through the field of dark energy whirling in the opposite direction, what starts to happen is, as it slows down through angular momentum into ordinary light, and it starts to form particles that break off from the pure energy field. What we know, what I'm going to argue here, is that compared to the Big Bang theory, which would posit the disintegration of matter, this theory of dark energy and dark matter being an infinite entanglement, interconnected entanglement with each other, starts to posit the actual formation of material matter form, and actually explains the nature of atomic structure.
Does it create an atom?
Yes, exactly. Because when you look at an atom, and I have this illustrated also in my new book, when you look at an atom, what you see is at the core center of an atom is protons. Different combinations of protons depending on the particular material matter that forms. Now, what I argue is that a proton has lost some of its positronic charge through the interaction. And part of what happens when the positronic force is going through the electron is that as some of the energy breaks off, it forms a gluon. And physics seems to substantiate this, that a gluon forms. And similarly now, when the electron force is penetrated and it loses some of its charge, it loses one of its electrons, a quark is created. And so part of what I argue is, remember, the quark has a bit of negative charge to it, but much lesser than an ordinary electron. And similarly, a gluon is a positive charge, but much less than a pure positron. So when these two forces interact in the center of this interaction, they create a neutron. A neutron, which is a neutralized quark and gluon with sufficiently less charge to hold together. And this is what forms the basis for the proton now to start to clump in the center, and the remaining electron force to still spin on the outside of the atom, minus one electron, right? So, I mean, what other theory have you ever seen that ever could explain the creation of material matter form? And of course, the minute you get one atom created at the edge of a galaxy, it's automatically, due to its electromagnetic gravitational effect, it's going to attract the formation of other atoms, right? So now you start to see at the edges of a galaxy the reformation out of pure dark energy and dark matter, the reformation of a new galaxy. And so when we look into, when modern cameras have, looked into the very edges of the galaxy, me and my wife recently watched a video.
Is that the Hubble?
Yeah, the Hubble, when they had to repair it because it lost some of its focus, they went in and they put the capacity to magnify at least 10 times as powerful. So with the ordinary Hubble repaired, they noticed a spot in the universe where a size of a quarter where there didn't seem to be anything on the other side of it. So they honed this 10 times magnification into that quarter size, and guess what they found? Something like, I think it was 13,000 new galaxies. Okay, so I mean, this notion that some kind of Big Bang could have created this, without beginning or end to infinity and beyond, that concept of a God principle versus like some first cause, which St. Thomas Aquinas got into and sold us on to the whole idea that there had to be some first cause, some Big Bang that started it all. The other part of the old biblical argument was always that whatever this is, whatever this great mystery is, it's without beginning or end. It's to infinity and beyond, okay? So what my theory does is sort of support this, but at the same time, it starts to show how material matter mass begins to accumulate and form galaxies to infinity and beyond, right? And there's other things that I explain in to me, when we really get this, it's going to have huge, huge implications for modern science. Because one of the things is in terms of the equality or the parity of forces, if we've discovered that copper can conduct electron force and create electricity, there must be some element, some comparable opposite element that is capable of attracting and conducting positron force. So if we could figure out a way to generate, in the same way that we generate electricity, the opposite positronic force, which is ultimately what causes gravity, okay? And it's the strong force because it is so strong that it penetrates through the electron dark energy and actually starts to generate material matter mass to the point of the center of a galaxy where the material matter mass gets so huge that it once again, through a black hole, begins to create pure dark energy. So part of the implication of all this is that if we can figure out how to conduct positronic force and create it to the point where we could create a mini black hole, and we could have a craft that would be protected inside of this mini black hole or wormhole from the positronic force getting so strong that it would destroy it, but yet it would carry it into a wormhole, and once in a wormhole, that craft would be in no space-time, in zero-point space-time, right? Non-local time. Therefore, it could infinitely, potentially, go anywhere in the entire infinite universe, provided it had the coordinates, provided there was instrumentation to relocate and come out the wormhole at whatever coordinates such a craft might pose. So anyway, not only that, if you can see that this could be the basis for us creating, smaller black holes, wormholes, through which we could project some kind of a UFO spacecraft. Because the bottom line, what David and I came to a conclusion in one of our great discussions years ago, is that there's just no way you can project material matter mass through such huge distances. The amount of energy required, to go even to another solar system within our galaxy is so enormous that it's just unfeasible to have that much energy being burned to try to project in ordinary space-time. But if we could access non-local, extraordinary space-time, much in the way that David talks about in terms of quantum communication and all the scientific evidence which is showing that everything is more infinitely interconnected non-locally than we ever imagined. So what I'm saying is that it would, if we could create these mini black holes, wormholes, we could also potentially, it just occurred to me yesterday, we could also potentially, if we could locate the creation of such a black hole at the exact moment that some kind of atomic or nucleic bomb were to be exploded, if we could locate the black hole exactly in that spot, potentially it could swallow up the explosion and neutralize it totally. I mean, what an incredible counteractive weaponry to save our humanity this could potentially be, as well as to allow us to finally access the whole of the universe. And there's just all kinds of other implications of this sort of a scientific model that I can't even dream of. But I feel it incumbent upon me to share the understandings that I've come to and been blessed to come to. But here's the significant part. I thought I was actually going to spend more time on the second half, but I'm going to spend less. What led me to all of this understanding in quantum physics is that I've been blessed with the ability to have entered this kind of no space-time through my near-death experiences and through my, deep meditative present learning experiences. How to be so here and now embodied that your energy system, your unique bioenergetic energy system, actually condenses energy to such a powerful degree that you create, in a sense, a mini black hole inside of your whole brain, inside of your whole biophysiological nature. And you enter the present so deeply that you actually go through into no space-time. And to me, what the totally mind-blowing thing about being able to create that kind of deeper state consciousness, whole state consciousness within us, to where we create a mini black hole in our mind space. In a sense, you go into no mind, into big mind. You go from little yak mind, caught up in all this kind of that, or, endless either or argumentation. You go into a much more holistically integrative space in which you integrate through ever higher brainwave states, from like alpha through theta to conscious delta, not sleep delta, conscious delta. And as Joe Dispenza is showing recently, even high amplitude gamma waves, where you start to go into deep, like not only just blissful, but actually ecstatic, whole being, totally awake, conscious states. You go through to the other side and you start to be able to access no space-time. And here's like sort of the coup de grace in terms of my theory. What I argue in terms of anything that going through a black hole, a giant black hole in the center of a galaxy, or a smaller black hole through a wormhole, or even the effect of a mini black hole that is created by a supernova, because whenever you have a big explosion, you have the opposite contractive effect that happens at the end of the explosion, which sucks everything back into a mini black hole. Whenever anything goes through a black hole and in a sense is reduced back into pure dark energy, part of what I argue is, what if we know that energy can never be destroyed? It can be altered, it can be shifted through atomic explosion, but it can never be destroyed. Energy can never be destroyed. So what I argue is, what if the informational code that holds any material matter form, any atomic structure that holds it together, that informational code can never be destroyed as well? What if? In a sense, what if the informational code that is you, when you die and go through a larger black hole, through death, through actual death, and in a sense, your material matter form collapses, but your spirit, your pure energy goes through a larger black hole, goes out into pure dark energy again. What if the information code of you is never destroyed? What if the information code of any atom that has ever manifested throughout the entire universe is never destroyed? Well, this helps explain how when a new galaxy is forming, it's basically always formed out of the same elements, right? They may come together in different ways, but those codes are there. It's like pure energy knows how to reform because the codes are still existent, almost as a spirit bubble of some kind. And so what if the human, you, as a spirit bubble, when you pass over to the other side, your spirit bubble is still out there, okay? Suddenly this helps to explain all of the psychic phenomena that we've ever recorded on the frontiers of human psychology. It helps to explain why people can communicate with those who've passed over. It helps to explain somebody like a Nostradamus who could go through to the other side. He had a ritual that he would practice. He would go through to that other side, and he could see into the future because the codes in non-local space-time, in a sense, there's an Akashic record, a record of everything that has ever been or is potentially going to be, is somehow recorded, but at the same time, it opens the space for constant evolution. It opens the space that whatever this unified field force theory godness principle is, that it's still open to potential evolution. Through given the history of everything is recorded, the evolution of everything is still open. It's, I like to argue, what if it's an open book? And to conclude this little presentation, I will bring it back to one of my favorite quotes from Neil Donald Walsh in his very last book of the 5 series of Conversations of God, in which, after conversing with God over a period of, I can't remember how many years it was, close to 10 years, he writes these 5 books, and he comes to the conclusion, he goes, oh my God, I think I finally get it. He said, all these conversations that we've had with you, God Principle, I think I finally get it. If everything were completely, absolutely known, if existence of the universe was a closed book, and it was all there, written, absolute, then the consciousness principle that is witnessing this constant, infinitely entangled, interactive communication with spirit bubble information would get bored, because it would know totally what's going to happen. But he said, oh, you great mysterious God Principle, if you were to leave it as an open book, for the interaction to continuously, spontaneously create quantum leaps in newness and new things, new beings, new consciousness. Then it would be very interesting, because even you yourself, the oneness principle, wouldn't know what's going to happen next. New magic could potentially always happen, especially insofar as beings with the ability to become conscious would enter through that big mind mini black hole inside of one's consciousness and enter the other side and start to see giant new insights, new ideas about all kinds of things, because that's how new ideas happen. Then, in a sense, this great mystery is an open book. And we are participants. We have the ability, as made in the image beings, we've been given the potential to participate in the constant evolution of this giant great mystery. Om Shanti Hallelujah. Jai Guru Dev.
So, say your name again.
Dr. Lynn Sereda.
And what's your title? I mean, do you have a
PhD in psychology, 2 masters, one from Alberta, one from Berkeley, and a PhD in educational psychology, with a lot of emphasis on psychology. And even back then, I was interested in the creative process principles. So I took a lot of courses in the psychology department, especially around deeper consciousness and creativity. And I was way back then, I was interested in our human potential and how big is that potential. And these are some of the conclusions I've come to.
To infinity and beyond, right?
Exactly. An
All right.
open book.
All right. Thank you very much. We'll close this chapter.